It was an unforgettable day, I can tell you that. By all accounts, it was a regular Saturday night dinner. Even young Rachel was there, staying with us for the weekend as she often did. Rachel's mother, Andorra, was a widow and worked weekends as a cab controller. Rachel and our daughter, Orderly, became best friends in high school and often had sleepovers. Rachel stayed with us on Fridays and Saturdays while her mother worked 12-hour night shifts. My ex-wife, Marge, knew Andorra well, but I had never met her. Marge thought Andorra might turn my head, so we never crossed paths. I traveled a lot for work then, trying to break into a crowded market. Marge usually handled the kids, and on Sundays, Rachel would be picked up by any available cab. Rachel enjoyed the treats the cab drivers brought, and Orderly liked it too. Now, back to that infamous Saturday night dinner. The four of us were eating when Marge, without warning, announced, "Pete, I want a divorce. I'm leaving you." She said it as if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell. When your wife of 10 years suddenly says she wants a divorce, your first reaction is disbelief. "I said I want a divorce. I found someone else, and I want to spend the rest of my life with him." With two 8-year-old girls at the table, including our daughter, I kept my composure. I was proud of my self-control. I must have said something stupid like, "If that's the case, I'm going apartment hunting tomorrow." Marge responded, "No, you'll have to keep the house. You'll need it for Orderly." I stopped pretending to eat and stared at Marge. "We're going on a trip around the world, and Orderly can't miss her schoolwork," she added, not even looking up. "You've got to be kidding me," I replied louder than I intended, trying to stay calm for the girls. Marge probably chose this moment because she knew I'd hold back in front of the children. "I want to see the world while I'm still young enough to enjoy it," she said, oblivious to the irony. When we first met, I was passionate about traveling. I planned to travel the world after finishing my engineering degree. Marge and I talked about seeing the Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, Ayers Rock, and New Zealand. But Marge wanted to have children first. She said, "While I'm young enough to enjoy them." Irony or what? I thought I understood Marge's position. Her parents were old when she was born, so she wanted to travel the world once the kids were grown. Apparently, she changed her mind. Taking care of Orderly wasn't as fun as she thought. The pregnancy and birth were difficult, and she dropped the idea of having more kids without much discussion. I nearly broke down, but couldn't laugh out loud. Instead, I got up and started pruning the roses in the garden. After a while, I noticed Rachel and Orderly quietly helping. "Watch out for thorns, girls. You're not wearing gardening gloves," I warned. "We'll be careful, Dad," Orderly replied. "What's your mom doing?" I asked. "She's upstairs packing," Orderly said calmly. I was furious but didn't want to destroy the roses. I watched the girls and resisted the urge to confront Marge. How could any mother, especially my wife, do this to her child? "Sorry, Orderly," I said. "Why, Daddy? You didn't leave us. Mom did," she replied. "Most kids at school have dads who left. I'd rather stay with a dad who loves me than a mom who—" She didn't finish, and I still wonder what she meant. Marge always seemed to be a loving mother. Was I blind to something? I realized the girls were holding hands and working together on the same rose bush. I could hear Marge talking on the phone, probably to her new man. "Ice cream," I announced. "Let's get the biggest ice cream we can find, girls." They cheered, and we went to a restaurant for Sundays. It took them a while to eat, giving me time to process Marge's announcement and its consequences. Surprisingly, I didn't care that Marge was leaving. Any love I had for her vanished with her announcement. My main concern was childcare. I could take care of Orderly but needed help with school and vacations. My employers might help, but work hours clashed with school hours. I realized Rachel's mother would have to deal with her own problems while I managed mine. I thought I would have to call my sister Carol later to explain the situation. My only plan was to see if Carol could pick up Orderly from school, even though it would be a long drive. I called Carol, hoping she'd have a solution. "What did she do?" Carol shouted when I briefly explained Marge's statement, trying not to go into details in front of the girls. I realized I knew very little about Marge's affair. "Carol, Marge ran off with some guy and left us." "Who? What guy?" Carol demanded. "I have no idea. Just some Casanova, I guess." "His name is Ronald," said Orderly. "He's a library customer," added Rachel. Marge had been working part-time at the library. I repeated their words to Carol. "My problem is, I don't know how to handle picking up Orderly from school every day. I can drop her off in the mornings, but I can't finish work by 2:30. "It's okay, Daddy. Rachel's mom is picking me up," Orderly said. "It wouldn't be fair to ask her to do that every day," I replied. "Oh, that won't be a problem. We've thought of everything," Orderly explained. "Rachel will stay with us on weekends, and I'll stay with Rachel and her mom during the week. On Mondays, you can drive us to school, and Rachel's mom will pick us up. Carol, overhearing, said, "I think it's a brilliant plan, Pete. Did you ask her?" "No, I've never met Rachel's mother. I had no idea if she would agree." "The cab driver has been asking my mom to work on Sundays," Rachel joined in. "Mom said she'd earn more working Sundays, but didn't want to impose on Orderly's mom." "The kids have solved your problem. What does Rachel's mother look like?" "I have no idea. I've never met her." "Well, you'd better go talk to her soon and see what she thinks of the plan." Carol then asked, "Has Marge moved out yet?" "I have no idea. We're at a restaurant. I think she was packing when we left." "Get some new door locks while you're in town. Call me if you need anything tonight. Frank and I can come over if you want, but we'd have to bring the kids." "Thank you, Carol, but I don't think it will be necessary. The help I need is right here with me." The girls grinned at each other, then at me. Carol wasn't surprised or upset that Marge was leaving. They were never close. After finishing the ice cream, we went back to the car. I had to inform Rachel's mother that I'd be the only adult with the girls that evening and make sure she was okay with it. There are some strange people these days, and I hadn't met Rachel's mother yet. I pulled up outside the cab office and went inside to find Rachel's mother, leaving the girls in the car. "I'm Pete Thomas. I'm looking for Rachel's mother," I said to the cabbie behind the counter. I vaguely remembered him from a Sunday pickup. Oddly, I didn't know Rachel's mother's real name. We always called her Rachel's mother, and Rachel called her Mom. The cabbie gestured to a door marked Ladies Only, with a paper reading Andora's office. The other cab drivers in the office went silent, focusing on the TV. After a seemingly long wait, Andora emerged. She was stunning, dressed simply in tight jeans and a blouse, yet looked like a runway model. "Andora, there's a guy here to see you," said the cabbie. "Hey, Pete, is something wrong?" she asked, smiling but slightly concerned. "Yeah, no, well, maybe," I replied nervously. "Rachel is fine. I just need to talk privately." The cab drivers began to leave, but Andora told them to stay, and we went outside. "What's up, Peter? You don't look too good," Andora said as she noticed the girls in the car and waved. "Marge left me," I stammered. It was strange talking to Andora for the first time, especially since she recognized me. "My God, poor thing," she reacted, then asked, "Does this mean we have a childcare problem tonight?" "No, Andora. I just wanted to let you know I'll be watching the kids alone tonight. We've never met, and I thought you should know." "Not so much. Rachel talks about you all the time. She treats you like a surrogate father and has a picture of you next to her bed." "Oh my God. Where did she get that?" "Orderly gave it to her, I guess." "Do you want me to take the day off and take the girls?" No, I just wanted you to know. I'm fine looking after Rachel." "I'm sure Rachel couldn't be in better hands, Peter," she said, taking my hand. "I'll come and get Rachel in the morning." "No, you need to get some sleep. Maybe stop by tomorrow so we can discuss the future. If you want, I can bring Rachel home." "Oh yes, the future," Andora replied, looking concerned. "Don't worry, we can work something out. The girls have plenty of ideas." I smiled. Andora seemed relieved. "Thank you. Yes, I guess that's the way it is. I'll see you tomorrow night. Don't worry about Rachel. She's wonderful." Andora kissed the girls goodnight and told them to behave. When we pulled up to the house, an unfamiliar car was parked in the driveway. Marge got out as I pulled to the curb. "Where have you been? I've been waiting for hours," Marge demanded before curtly informing us she was leaving. Despite the earlier bombshell, her behavior was unrecognizable to me. "If that's who I think it is, tell him to move his car before I do it for him," I snapped, annoyed that she had her new guy there. Marge gestured, and the Jaguar roared to life, moving across the street. Ignoring her, I reversed into the spot where the Jaguar had been. Marge complained I almost hit her. "Oh, you're still here? I thought you left." I lied and headed to the front door. "Aren't you taking your car?" I asked, noting her Nissan was empty while the Jaguar was packed. "No point. Sell it. We're flying out on Wednesday," she replied. "Where do I send the divorce papers?" I thought, but she preempted me. "Ronnie's lawyer's address is on the kitchen table," she said curtly, then spoke to Orderly and Rachel. I didn't wait to hear the conversation and went inside with the girls following. They high-fived each other, but I ignored it. We watched TV for a while, then I sent the girls to bed. They went without argument, which was a first for Orderly. I had a couple of whiskeys to help me sleep. Sunday morning, I woke to the smell of frying bacon. For a moment, I forgot Marge had left and thought she was making breakfast. Then I remembered the previous day. The room seemed different. All signs of Marge were gone. Even her parents' pictures were missing. I went to the bathroom, and her personal items were also gone. It seemed someone had cleaned up while I slept. "Come on, Dad, breakfast is getting cold," Orderly called from the stairs. In the kitchen, the girls insisted I sit while they served breakfast: fries, orange juice, and coffee, like a hotel. They had cornflakes, juice, and tea. I complimented their cooking, and they beamed. Carol, Frank, and their kids arrived before we finished. The calm was broken, but the girls quickly served coffee to Carol and Frank. It took some coaxing to get the girls to leave the dishwashing and go play with Carol's kids. Carol busied herself with the dishes while Frank and I had coffee, and I recounted the events of the previous day. They assured me they'd help however they could. Frank recommended a good divorce lawyer. Carol made dinner with what was in the fridge, and I spent most of the day tending to my roses, occasionally chatting with them. Rachel and Orderly helped me with the roses in the afternoon, and Rachel quoted a line from the song, "It's been a good year for the roses," which struck a chord with me given the situation. Around 4:30, a cab pulled up, and Dora arrived. The girls let her in, and we got acquainted. Carol, Andorra, and I discussed the girls' babysitting plan. Andorra confirmed she'd be working a Sunday night shift, earning more than at her current job. We agreed to the plan with minor adjustments and Carol's occasional help during school vacations. Andorra called her boss to confirm the extra shift and got an immediate yes. She looked to me for confirmation, and I nodded. We realized Rachel needed school clothes for the next day, so Carol drove Andorra and Rachel home to pick them up, with Orderly insisting on going too. As I carried Rachel's bag inside, I asked Andorra if she drove. "Yeah, but since Tony left, I can't afford a car," she replied. "How about using the Micra?" I asked, pointing to Marge's car. "I can't," she said. "Why not?" "She told me to get rid of it. You'll need it to drive Orderly to and from school." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes, let's call the insurance company and add you as a driver," I insisted. "We'll deal with Marge's insurance separately." "His name is Ronald, Dad," Orderly corrected me. "Who cares? He's Ronald the Rat to me," I replied sharply. "But he's funny and cute," she insisted, referring to a puppet character from TV. I relented with a smile. "Okay, Ronald the Rat." Over the next few weeks, we adapted to the new routine. Carol and Frank often visited on Saturdays, checking the pantry and sometimes cooking lunch. Although housework wasn't my strength, I managed to keep things in order, and Carol never complained. Weekdays were lonely, but I adjusted. Fridays were a highlight when I came home to Andorra and the girls. Andorra often cooked for us before her Friday night shift. The hardest times were coming home to an empty house and waking up alone, dealing with the resentment toward Marge. After years of marriage, waking up alone every morning took some getting used to. There were complications with the divorce. Marge and her new man had left the country, traveling extensively, making it hard for her attorney to reach her. I learned that his ex-wife was demanding child support and had blocked his UK accounts. I helped by informing her attorney of Marge's whereabouts whenever she called Orderly. Credit goes to Orderly for prying out that information and passing it on to me. Whether Orderly knew why I needed the information, I'm unsure. The difficulties Marge's attorney faced worked in my favor. At a court hearing, Marge's solicitor asked for another adjournment, claiming he was waiting to hear from her. The judge, frustrated, asked if I knew where Marge was. "I'm sorry, sir," I replied, standing up. "I haven't spoken to my wife since she left us." I didn't mention Marge's calls to Orderly every 3 weeks because the judge didn't ask about that. The judge noted Marge's unreasonable behavior for not communicating with her attorney and suggested I had grounds for desertion. He granted my divorce and gave me full custody of Orderly. "I don't see how joint custody can work if Mrs. Thomas can't communicate with her attorney," he said. "Mr. Thomas, I grant you full custody and terminate Mrs. Thomas's parental rights, with one condition." He told Marge's attorney to inform her she had 21 days to appear in court if she wished to contest. The judge then addressed me again. "It surprises me you haven't demanded child support from your wife." "Frankly, Your Honor, I don't see much chance of collecting it unless Marjorie returns to the country," I replied. The judge ordered a nominal £100 monthly support, doubting I would ever receive it but setting a precedent. He advised my legal representatives to verify any assets Marge might have in the UK. I walked out of court as a single man with full custody of Orderly and rights to any property Marge had in the country. I never bothered to look for it. On Monday, I noticed an international call on the log from the day before, likely from Marjorie. Neither Orderly nor Rachel mentioned the call or Marjorie's location, which was unusual. I figured it out but didn't dwell on it, focusing instead on our new routine. As time went on, Marjorie's calls to Orderly became less frequent. I wasn't surprised. They were one-sided, aside from Orderly's subtle inquiries about Marjorie's location, which ceased once her boyfriend's divorce was settled. Somehow, Orderly and Rachel knew about it, likely through school connections. The divorce was finalized about 4 months ago. One Saturday, while at a movie and having burgers, Rachel announced she and her mother would move soon due to a rent increase. I didn't realize this was part of a larger plan. It turned out the girls had plotted to have Andorra and Rachel move in with us. At dinner one Friday, Orderly casually asked Andorra if she found an apartment yet. Rachel then exaggerated horror stories about their search. Orderly suggested, "We have a spare room. Why don't Rachel and Aunt Andorra move in with us?" I thought Orderly's idea made sense, saving Andorra from rent and reducing our running around. I looked to Andorra for her thoughts, but she avoided eye contact. I didn't want to reject the idea outright or put Andorra in an awkward spot, so I tried to be cautious. "Well, sometimes people might get the wrong idea about a man and woman living together," I said. Andorra laughed. "Geez, Pete, you sound like a prude." "I was just thinking of your reputation." "My reputation? You're kidding me. I already face rumors at my apartment because I'm away every weekend and drive a new car. People think I'm doing something else." "You're kidding," I said. "No, they even wrote to my landlord. I told them I work at a cab company, but the rumors persist." "You need to get out of there." "I know, but finding an affordable apartment is tough." "What about Orderly's idea? There's plenty of room." "Yeah, you're right. Without the girls, this place is like a morgue. And you're not a bad cook." "Should I take that as a compliment?" "Yes. The room is yours if you want it, Andorra. The girls seem excited." "We'll need to discuss rent," suggested Andorra. "No need. I don't like housekeeping, and you're a better cook. Maybe you'll handle cooking here." "I'd pay for utilities and housekeeping," Andorra insisted. "We'll discuss that later. Are you sure you want to move in?" "If you're inviting us, then yes, we'd love to." "Then it's settled. When do you want to move in?" "Well, our apartment is furnished. Don't worry. Most of my things can be thrown away. I sold the good stuff years ago after Tony left when I needed money." So, we agreed. Andorra and Rachel moved in with Orderly and me. "What happened?" I asked Andorra, but her look told me she'd explain later when the kids weren't around. I knew her husband had died in a traffic accident years ago, but didn't know the details. Later, while walking Andorra to the car, I heard a distinct smack and saw Orderly and Rachel looking innocent. Andorra and Rachel moved in the following week. Most of Andorra's furniture was discarded, but some items made it into the house, with others stored in the garage. Her TV and music center ended up in the girls' room. The house felt like a home again, and my mood improved noticeably. I stopped going for after-work drinks because I had bedtime stories to read to my 2 daughters. My traveling days ended when Marge left. My boss started sending others on trips, and I stayed home. Shortly after Andorra moved in, I began to fall for her, though I tried to hide it. Andorra, a year younger than me, always looked immaculate and had a great sense of humor. She never resented the girls or me, and even tolerated my quirks. I realized I loved her from the moment I met her. Carol noticed first. That Christmas, while setting the table with Carol, she asked, "Have you told Andorra yet?" "Told her what?" "That you're in love with her, you fool," Carol said. "Don't be silly, Carol. Pete, I can read you like a book. You're more hooked on Andorra than you were on Stephanie Mathers." Stephanie Mathers was my high school crush who broke my heart. Carol and her friends had helped me forget her. "I'm attached to Andorra, but I don't want to upset the balance," I said. "Peter, she likes you as much as you like her. You two act like school kids in love." "What do you mean?" "You both avoid touching each other. Either you hate each other, which I doubt, or you're in love." "So you think Andorra likes me?" "Yes, Pete. She's as smitten as you are. Even the girls see it." "What should I do?" "Tell her how you feel. You've charmed women before." "Marge was different." "You never liked Marge, did you?" "No, I didn't trust her. She had you wrapped around her finger. But those 2 little girls love you, which I never thought Marge did." "Marge loved me when we married." "Think what you want, Pete. Now, there's a woman in the kitchen who loves you. Find a way to melt the ice." Just as our conversation started, Andorra walked in to check on dinner preparations, forcing Carol and me to change the subject. During dinner, Carol kept giving me meaningful looks and shared a private joke with Orderly and Rachel. Over the next few days, I nearly brought up Andorra several times, but always hesitated. On New Year's Eve, Andorra was working, and Carol and Frank took the girls so I could go to a party with office friends. Reluctantly, I agreed. Around 4 a.m., the party wound down. I called a cab, Andorra answered. Hey, gorgeous, can you send one of the guys to take me home? I slurred. Are you mad, Pete? Andorra replied. I had a hard time deciding which phone to call, I joked. Try not to throw up in the car, she warned, laughing. Phil, the driver, arrived and helped me into the cab. As we drove, I realized we weren't heading to my house. You're going the wrong way, I muttered. You need someone to put you to bed, and it won't be me. I think I know who will volunteer, Phil replied. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, Phil and Dora were helping me out of the car. Andorra clung to my arm, helping me to the door. Phil helped me upstairs, and then Andorra began loosening my clothes to make me comfortable. Intoxicated, I saw this as the perfect opportunity. Andorra leaned over me, and I muttered, You know, you're one hell of an attractive little Andorra. What does that mean? She asked. That you're good enough to eat, and I'm hungry, I slurred with a smirk. How much have you had to drink? She asked. Not enough. Jesus, Pete, you're as drunk as a newt. Yeah, but if I drank a little more, I'd have the courage to tell you how much I love you, I confessed. I'll believe it when you can tell me sober. Now get some sleep, and we'll see how you feel in the morning, Andorra said, smiling. She stood to leave, but I grabbed her arm, pulling her gently onto the bed beside me. She didn't try to get up, and I soon dozed off. The next morning, sunlight pouring in worsened my hangover. Disappointed, I found Andorra was no longer beside me. I tried to lift my head and groaned in pain. Here, have a drink, I heard Andorra's voice behind me. What is it? I asked, shielding my eyes from the sunlight. It can't be poison until you marry me. I need life insurance on you first, she joked. How do you know I won't bump you off first? I replied, trying to be witty. You can't. You have 2 daughters to look after, she said with a smirk. One of them is yours, I reminded her. They think of themselves as sisters and see you as their father, she noted. And you're like Orderly's mother now. She's called me Mom several times recently, I added. I hadn't noticed, she said, sounding surprised. And Rachel's been calling you Daddy for a month now, I informed her. Really? Did she? She asked, astonished. Yes, even Carol and Frank noticed, I confirmed. Did you discuss it with Carol on Boxing Day? She inquired. I discussed a lot with Carol, I replied. Is she already planning her wedding outfit? I joked, despite my hangover. Andorra sat holding the drink she prepared for me, looking confused. So, are you going to marry me or not? I asked, breaking the silence. You didn't ask me, she pointed out. I wanted to know your answer before I asked. It's less embarrassing if I get rejected, I explained. Well, you wouldn't look foolish if you asked, she replied thoughtfully. But, I prompted, but I have a confession. I'm not a widow. Tony's not dead. Legally, I was never married to him, she revealed. I'm confused, I admitted. Tony was a bigamist. He was already married when he married me, so our marriage is null and void, she explained. Wow, so you're not a widow and never married? I clarified. Yes, it's easier to tell everyone I'm a widow, she admitted. In that case, would you do me the honor of, I started, but we got distracted and spent the next hour kissing and hugging, almost forgetting my headache. By the time Frank brought the girls home at 3 p.m., Andor and I were in the kitchen, planning how to tell the girls. They seemed to understand immediately, likely because Andor was almost sitting on my lap. They hugged us both, and when Frank entered, he said, Congratulations. When? We set a date for mid-February and planned a modest celebration, though the girls wanted something more extravagant. We settled on an average-sized event with the wedding at the registry office and a small reception afterward. Neither of us had many living relatives, and the registry office avoided the complications of public announcements, keeping things simple for Andor, who was supposed to be a widow. After Frank went home, Andor had the delicate task of submitting her resignation to the taxi company's supervisor. She wouldn't work night shifts due to personal preferences, which irritated me because I disliked sleeping alone. We decided to sleep in separate bedrooms until the wedding to set a good example for the girls regarding extramarital lovemaking. Still, I developed the habit of coming home for long lunches once the girls were back in school, improving my mood significantly. The following weekend, Andor worked her last shifts at the taxi depot, bringing home numerous flowers and chocolates from her colleagues. That Sunday night, several drivers and their wives invited us for dinner and fun at a local pub, making cabs scarce in town. The wedding arrived quickly and went smoothly. Our girls were perfect bridesmaids, and Andor looked stunning. We spent one night in the honeymoon suite at the luxury hotel where we held the reception, while Frank and Carol took the girls home. Our plan was to spend most of the school summer vacation traveling with the girls. That first year, we spent 5 weeks driving around Florida, the Caribbean, and Southern California, seeing and experiencing as much as possible. A week or two after the wedding, I noticed something was wrong when I got home from work. The girls were happy, but Andor seemed upset. After the girls went to bed, she told me what was bothering her. "Does Rachel know Tony isn't dead?" Andor asked. "How did she know?" I was shocked since we had never discussed it around the girls. Andor explained that the girls often hid pictures of Marjorie and Tony in their drawers. When asked why, Rachel said, "They don't need us. We don't want to look at their pictures." Rachel knew her father had not died in a traffic accident but had run away, though she didn't know why. Andor decided not to explain further to avoid telling Rachel she was technically illegitimate. Surprisingly, Rachel didn't seem bothered by the truth, which I thought helped the girls feel closer. Andor turned out to be an amazing wife and mother. She was patient with the kids and me, even when things got hectic at the office. Despite my flaws, Andor never mentioned them and had a wonderful sense of humor, often teasing me playfully. Our nights, though sometimes tiring, were filled with love and laughter. By early summer, Marjorie's calls to Orderly had almost stopped. Orderly, angry at her mother, became more persistent when Marjorie did call. Andor and I had to reprimand her for calling Andor new mommy during these conversations. Orderly then switched tactics, talking about our family activities and referring to Andor as Daddy's wife, and Rachel as my sister. We discussed Orderly's behavior, but realized we couldn't list all the words and phrases to forbid. Marjorie had to deal with the consequences of her actions. Before our vacation ended, Orderly and Rachel started asking if we were really their mom and dad. They left printouts about adoption procedures around the house, hinting at Andor adopting Orderly and me adopting Rachel. They even found forms for changing Rachel's name to Thomas. After discussing, Andor and I decided to pursue both adoptions. Rachel's father, though absent, still had legal rights. Our attorney for my divorce case handled the process. It took over a year, but we eventually terminated Tony's parental rights and completed the adoptions. Coincidentally, the same judge for my divorce case presided over Tony's termination. Legally, we became Mr. and Mrs. Thomas with our daughters Orderly and Rachel. We considered having more children, but decided against it. After our marriage, I got a promotion, which included a bigger salary and more delegation. Our summer trips became regular, making up for my lack of travel earlier in life. In our second year, we spent 5 weeks in Europe, the third year in India and Sri Lanka, and the fourth in Australia and New Zealand. By the fifth summer, Orderly and Rachel, both 14, documented our travels with video cameras. We planned a trip to Canada, the northern U.S., and Alaska, with the girls making detailed plans. About 2 years after our marriage, Marjorie started sending us Christmas cards, though we couldn't reciprocate because they lacked a return address. The cards had Canadian stamps, suggesting Marjorie and Ronald had settled there. Marjorie was rarely mentioned, and she hadn't called Orderly in years, so no one brought it up. As usual, our master plan for the extended summer vacation changed when the girls pointed out we couldn't visit all the desired locations within the given time, even after significant cuts. We decided to split our trip, focusing on the West that summer and saving the East for another year. We arrived in Winnipeg on an Air Canada flight in late June, spending a day or two exploring the city's historic sites. From Manitoba, we drove west to Saskatchewan, then south through the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Kansas, before turning west and north again through Colorado and Wyoming, where we stayed at a dude ranch. While the horses were pleasant to ride, I preferred English saddles over the Western ones, feeling less confident about getting out of them if something went wrong. There are 2 theories about riding horses or motorcycles: stay with it and hope to regain control, or back off and hope to fall safely. The idea of being on a horse or motorcycle with a spinning rear wheel has never appealed to me. We eventually entered Montana and stopped in a town I had always wanted to visit, likely read about in some Western. After checking into a motel, we headed to a nearby diner. The diner was crowded and noisy, but suddenly there was a loud crash followed by silence as a waitress dropped a tray of food. Andor and I, like everyone else, turned to see who had dropped the tray. To my surprise, I recognized the culprit. She also recognized me, likely causing her to drop the tray. The poor woman stood there, stunned, staring straight at me. Andor recognized her too, and we both reacted by saying almost the same thing in unison to our girls. "Eat your dinner, Rachel, Orderly. There's nothing to worry about," Andor and I reassured the girls, each addressing our own adopted daughter. Despite adopting each other's children 5 years ago, we still tended to scold our own first. Both girls were trying to catch a glimpse of the commotion's cause. Orderly quickly recognized the woman, muttered, "So be it," and returned to her meal. Rachel stared a bit longer, then looked at me, smiled, glanced at her mother, and resumed eating like Orderly. The other diners, realizing the incident was related to us, stared, but we ignored them and continued our meal. "I guess the grass wasn't as green as it looked," Andor whispered as we headed to the car with the girls. "What do you mean?" I asked a bit curtly. "If she's working here, she's likely no longer with Ronald. One of them probably cheated," Andor explained. "Once a cheater, always a cheater. But she didn't cheat on you. She dumped you and Orderly. Leaving her daughter is like cheating." "Either she couldn't stay faithful or he couldn't," I replied. "Does it matter?" Andor asked. "Only if she tries to cause trouble now. Orderly's been through enough," I said firmly. "It's too late for her to cause trouble. Orderly handled it better than you did. After all, the girls—" Andor began. "Don't say that, Andor. I know what the girls did, and I'm glad we have such clever little manipulators." "I just wonder how far their plans go," I interrupted. "What do you mean?" Andor asked, looking puzzled. "Nothing major, just that they seem to be working to a plan. Sometimes I wonder how far in advance they planned everything," I mused. "Don't worry. I'm very pleased with how things are. I'm just curious sometimes," Andor said reassuringly. We reached the car, and I unlocked the doors with the remote. The kids jumped into the back seats. I opened the front door for Andorra, but she didn't get in. Instead, she came up to me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me. The girls in the back murmured and shouted approvingly, making comments like "not in public" and "wait until you're in your room." Despite their playful remarks, both were mature for their age due to their difficult pasts. Andora's husband died when Rachel was 6, and Orderly's mother left us when she was 8. Andor suddenly interrupted the kiss. "We have an audience," she whispered, looking over my shoulder. I saw Marjorie standing in the kitchen doorway watching us. "Do you think Orderly should?" Andor suggested. "Yeah, I don't think we have a choice," I replied. I knew I would have to confront Marjorie later and arrange for Orderly to meet her mother alone. Andor leaned against the car and spoke while I was still pondering. "Your mom is there. I think you should go see her," Andor told Orderly. "Do I have to?" Orderly replied. "She is your mother. You might regret missing this opportunity years from now." Orderly shrugged and reluctantly climbed out of the car. "I don't want to see her. Maybe Rachel will ride with me." "No, we'll be right here," assured Andor. Orderly, with reluctance and a few glances back at us, walked toward her mother, stopping about 10 feet away. Marjorie said something we couldn't hear and took a step forward, but Orderly immediately stepped back. It was frustrating not hearing their conversation, although it seemed Orderly did most of the talking. If Marjorie moved closer, Orderly retreated. "That's not good," muttered Andor. "Apparently so," I replied. Orderly soon turned and ran back to the car, jumped in, slammed the door, and fastened her seatbelt. Marjorie had disappeared from the doorway. I wanted to leave, but Andorra had other plans and was halfway to the door before Orderly finished fastening her seatbelt. I waited for about 10 minutes until Andorra returned. I gave her a questioning look as she got in the car. She glanced at the girls in the back seat and gave me a look that said, "Shut up and drive. We'll discuss this later." After lunch, we planned to stroll along the river path and see the waterfalls that the town was named after. We thought the hydroelectric dams had diminished their original splendor, but they were still impressive. As usual on these walks, Andorra and I never overdo hiking if we can avoid it. 2 girls went ahead, giving Andorra and me a chance to talk. "So, what did she say?" "He left. Dumped her 2 years ago for some waitress in this town. Just as we suspected. But I wonder why she didn't go back to the UK. He left her with the motel bill. The motel needed help in the restaurant, so she stayed to work off the bill. She's sharing a room with another woman. They both work in the restaurant during the day and serve drinks at the bar at night." "Sounds like fun. What else is she supposed to do, Pete? Gets herself laid every night by some barfly, I suppose." "No need to be nasty, Peter. Marjorie made a mistake, and now she's paying for it. Anyway, you'll meet her when she finishes work at the restaurant at 6 o'clock. She only has a couple of hours before her bar shift, so you can chat while I take the kids out for a bite." "Andorra, what the hell am I supposed to tell her?" I asked, exasperated. "You need to finish, Peter. No matter what you believe, you need to sit down and talk to her. Remember, she's Orderly's mother. Do you wish she remembered that Marjorie said the same thing?" Andorra advised, her tone calm but firm. "Peter, She regrets her actions and wants to apologize to Orderly and you. But I don't think Orderly is ready to accept that yet. That was clear at lunch. But in time, I'm sure she will. We just have to make sure we don't lose her again. Andorra continued, her voice gentle. Are you being magnanimous about all this, considering what Tony did to you? I asked, skeptical. Pete, is there any point in going through life with hate? What Tony did to me is worse than what Marjorie did to you or Orderly. For a while, I hated him and the other women he tricked into marrying him. Then one day, we were all sitting in the waiting room at the police station, and I realized we were all in the same boat. We had all been tricked and were not to blame. So we became friends. Tony, what's the point of cursing the idiot? If he shows up, I'll report him to the police. But I'm not wasting time hating him. I have more important people to worry about, Andorra said with conviction, pulling me to her and kissing my cheek. Besides, think about it. If Marjorie hadn't run off with that what's-his-name, where would we be now? She added. Good idea, Andorra, I conceded. I know, my love. We'd better hurry. It's 4 o'clock now, she said, glancing at the time. I was waiting in the restaurant parking lot when Marjorie came off duty. She came out with another, very dark-haired woman who scrutinized me before going her way. Marjorie looked nervous, not like the confident woman I last saw in the kitchen laying down the law all those years ago. She still looked quite attractive, though. Hi, Peter, thanks for coming. Marjorie greeted me, her voice tentative. The bar must be quiet now. Why don't we go there and talk? I didn't respond, but gestured for her to take the lead. I followed Marjorie to a booth at the back of the bar. It was obvious we were expected. I noticed the dark-haired woman behind the bar talking to the bartender as we entered. All the booths next to ours were empty. The dark-haired woman walked over and set 2 beers on the table, then said something to Marjorie in Spanish. Marjorie nodded in response. I assumed she had picked up the language during her time here. You wanted to see me, Marjorie? I said, reminding her that I hadn't asked for this meeting. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Peter, she finally whispered. I just now caught her words. No, you've done me a great favor, I replied. Come on, I'm not cut out to be a bloodthirsty diplomat. Yes, Andorra got the better end of the deal, Marjorie said bitterly. I should have realized she'd latch onto you as soon as I left, she replied bitterly. It was the other way around, Marjorie. As soon as I laid eyes on Andorra. I wasn't quite sure how to end that sentence. Maybe I thought if I had met Andorra before Marjorie left, I might have been the one to walk away. Maybe I'm wishful thinking, but I doubt I would have done that. I'm too bound by duty and other things to act so selfishly. Sometimes you wonder if this is a failure. What happened to Loverboy, after all? I asked Marjorie. And where did that creep get all his money? You know, he left his wife and kids without a penny, so she seized all his bank accounts. Ronald's money? What a joke. You mean everyone else's money? He was a crook, Peter. He's wanted everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why he left me. In the end, I helped him with some scams, and we had to leave Argentina quickly when my picture was in the local papers. I think he crossed into Canada when he found out the FBI was looking for him at the motel, coincidentally with one of the waitresses from the diner. Ironically, I'm now doing the job of that waitress. Wasn't the FBI after you? I asked. Pretty much, yes, Marjorie replied. But I made a deal with them. If I'm willing to testify against Ronald when they catch him, they agreed not to throw the book at me. In return, I got a slap on the wrist, 2 years probation for aiding a fugitive. I'm stuck in the country until they find him and have to report to the authorities every week. But it doesn't interfere much because Buster, the deputy sheriff I report to, is here or at the diner most of the time. Are you still in debt? I inquired. I was drowning in it. I signed over almost everything, including Ronald's rental car, and the woman drove off in it. I've nearly paid it all off, but there's still a few $1,000s left, she admitted. No, Pete, I can't, Marjorie protested as she saw me pull out my checkbook. For once in your life, do as you're told, Marjorie, I said sternly. Okay, I'll write this for £5,000, about $10,000. That should get you out of debt and give you something to lean on if you need it. If you decide to return to the UK when they catch him, we'll help you find a place and get settled. But don't think this gives you the right to interfere with our family. You know the courts have stripped you of all parental rights to Orderly, don't you? She made that clear to me this morning, Marjorie confirmed. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not why we sent her, I explained. I realized that when Andor walked into the kitchen. Pete, I was stupid. I never meant to hurt you and Orderly like that. I got swept up in Ronald's exciting stories. It wasn't worth it, she confessed. I assure you, Marjorie, that was a long time ago. I'm just glad you're safe. But Orderly and I have a new life now, and you are no longer a part of it. Andor and I will try to ensure Orderly keeps in touch with you, I said firmly. That's more than I deserve, Peter, and I really don't deserve this check, Marjorie said, shaking her head. Well, you'd better take it. It will ease my conscience a bit. When we leave tomorrow morning, we'll come to the diner for breakfast. Perhaps we can get Orderly to speak to you civilly once more, I suggested. I don't deserve your kindness, Peter, she repeated, her voice wavering. No, Marjorie. I had to make my point, even if I tried to convince myself otherwise. But you're Orderly's mother, and there's nothing I can do about it. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get back to my family, I said, standing up. Sure. I'm sorry, Pete, she said softly. I got up and walked away without looking back. When I found the girls, they were all waiting for me breathlessly. I took Andor aside and briefly told her about my conversation with Marjorie and the money I gave her. She doesn't deserve you, was Andor's only comment when I mentioned the check. That's pretty much what she said, I replied, kissing my wife. But you want to thank you, was all she replied to the remark. Later, I contacted Orderly alone and was about to start the "you only have one birth mother" routine when she informed me that Andorra and Rachel had already arrived. From that point on, the conversation didn't go as I had planned. Orderly said she would talk to her mother the next morning and would try to keep her mouth shut. She added that she wouldn't be alone with her mother and that Rachel or I would have to be present. When I asked why, she curtly replied that one of us was always present during the funeral. I didn't know how to respond, so I left it at that. The next morning, Marjorie, Orderly, and Rachel sat at a nearby table and talked for a long time. I can only assume Marjorie's friends were covering for her because I'm sure she had work to do. The only part of the conversation Andorra and I overheard was two kids raving about how well the roses were growing in the garden at their house. All three of them smiled most of the time. As we drove away, Marjorie walked to the car and kissed both girls goodbye. She then turned to Andor and me. These two are very lucky. They have found themselves the best mom and dad in the world. She said this somewhat unexpectedly, taking me by surprise, then turned and ran back into the restaurant. I guess she cried on the run. I kissed my wife. Then we got in the car and drove north to the Calgary border. From the way the kids were looking in the rearview mirror, I don't think they were looking back or particularly concerned that we had left this town behind. After we returned home that year, Marjorie kept in touch with her. Andor made a habit of writing to her fairly regularly. We never found out if the FBI had tracked Ronald down, but less than a year later, we learned that Marjorie was going to marry her deputy sheriff, or whatever his name was. We had a family gathering, and after much heartache, it was decided that we would decline the invitation to Marjorie's wedding. However, I managed to slip in there alone for a few days to attend. Don't ask me why, but for some reason I felt I had to do it. Buster, or Buddy, as everyone called him, turned out to be a really nice guy. Once I got to know him better, he even picked me up at the airport and introduced me to all his friends and family. I learned from Buddy that Marjorie had been very frank and open with him from the beginning. She admitted to everything she had done and told him how much she regretted her past actions. It turned out that Buddy had arranged with several of his trucker buddies to send her Christmas cards, etc., to us from various cities in Canada. I believe Marjorie was trying to hide from us the true circumstances she was in. It's a little weird to give your ex-wife away at her wedding, but I guess some idiot had to do the job. Maybe that's why I went, to kind of put a stop to the whole thing. I don't believe Orderly and Rachel figured out where I'd gone for those 5 days, but they could have. Those two were always one step ahead of me in just about everything. To be honest, they and Andorra still are. Over the next few years, we received news that Marjorie had given birth to 2 boys. We never saw them, though, except in pictures. Now that they are a little older, I believe the boys have fairly regular contact with Orderly and Rachel, but neither of my daughters mentions them or Marjorie to me. Very often, Orderly and Rachel ended up marrying 2 brothers. Sometimes I feel really sorry for these poor girls. The girls are still incredibly close to each other and definitely play a major role in these marriages. When our 2 girls are scheming together, it takes a man to come out on top. I don't think I've ever been able to do that. They both have 2 children, and suspiciously from my point of view, in both cases, the girls were born remarkably close to each other, both in date and physically. Andorra and I have enjoyed watching our grandchildren grow up and become very much like their mothers. I retired as managing director last year, and Andor and I are now enjoying an 8-month round-the-world trip. We've been pondering whether we'll find somewhere we'll want to settle down, but to be honest, I think our daughters and their families will pull us home to the UK again. We haven't sold the house. The girls wouldn't let us because of the roses. God knows how much time they spend there attending to it all, but we get regular reports. Just this morning, while checking the mail, I got a picture of my garden from them titled, "It's been a good year for roses. Life goes on. That's it."